our program officially starts at 11:45, and we'll go ahead and get started a little bit. I'm Angela Brown in the Division of Cardiology, and I'm co-director of the Office of Faculty Development with Mario Castro. And Mario will introduce himself when he gets here. So before we officially start, welcome to our Clinical Educator Portfolio Workshop. Just like to go around the room, and if everyone would say their name and their division, would be great. Start here with, and your role.
Joe Pangolin, Department of Medicine, Director of Diversity and Inclusion.
Wendy Blaney, I'm GI, Clinical Gastroenterologist.
I'm Caroline Mann. I'm in the Division of Dermatology, and I'm a medical dermatologist.
I'm Crystal Atwood. I'm with the Division of Hospital Medicine. I'm a hospitalist.
Dave Schwartz, Cardiology, a bunch of different cardiology type roles.
I am Jean Wang from the Division of Gastroenterology.
I'm Katie Matar. I'm in the Division of Infectious Diseases and Medical Education.
I'm Marie Blanco, Division of Infectious Diseases, Clinical Instructor.
Dr. Chapter. Hi. We're introducing ourselves.
Okay, hi, Ronald Chaptanella.
All right, good. Well, welcome. We may have a couple of other people joining us, but this is a small group. The majority of folks are here. So one of the reasons that we do these workshops is because, as you know, as part of the Department of Medicine, promotion process. We all have to have a CV and a clinical educator portfolio. And the CEP is new, relatively new to what we've typically had as our documentation. Dr. Castro? You want to do this part? I just got started. We didn't know where you were. Can you introduce yourself before I go into
Mario Castro, here, Angela's counterpart.
You want to eat first?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, okay. All right. So anyway, the clinical educator portfolio is relatively new within the last couple of years. It's something that the Department of Medicine requires as part of the promotion process, but the other departments don't. And our goal with the Office of Faculty Development is to make sure that you have the resources that you need to make sure that your careers here are successful. So as part of our mission statement, we're here for guidance and to provide resources that will foster your professional and personal development to achieve academic success. So this is just one part of our mission. This is a cartoon, kind of a joke, the academic career pace. And, we all feel that we're on this hamster wheel, that our division chiefs, our department chair, everybody just wants more and more and more out of us. And it's like faster, faster, faster. And what are we really getting? But our goal is to hopefully slow that wheel down a little bit so that you don't feel you're just constantly in a rat race and that we have those resources that you need to help slow the wheel down and make things a little bit easier to navigate. One of the things that we definitely encourage is that you keep track of your activities. And that's where the CV and the CEP definitely play a role. These are real-time documents, so the more you get in the habit of documenting your activities, whether it's clinical research, community service, volunteerism, any of the committees that you serve on, but just keep track of those things as you do them, as you do lectures, as you participate in national committees and give lectures and so forth. Keep track of that because it will make it easier going forward. But it's all part of your career development. Making sure that you have your other support updated. If you work with trainees, keeping your trainee tables updated as well. And definitely, we'd like to describe this as your portfolio. And these are the things that the department chair and the executive committee will look at when they start looking at you for promotion. Keep in mind that you may know what you do on a daily basis and your division chief, but we have to have these things on paper so that other folks can very easily look at it and say, wow, this person is really doing a stellar job. And the more information and the more detail you can give, the easier it makes it for them to understand what it is that you actually do. Well, this is a slide that was in here. It says, I don't have time to write performance reviews, so I'll just criticize you in public from time to time. That's not what we want. We want to make sure that everyone is in proper evaluation mode. So very important, again, that you have regular meetings with your division chiefs. to make sure that you're on target and on pace for promotion, and that you're doing, the things that are going to get you to that next step. Setting those goals. What are the short-term goals? 2 to 5 years. What are your long-term goals? But making sure you're having those regular meetings so that you, your division chief, and then ultimately your department chair are on the same page as you go through that process. So very important to interact with your mentors and bosses, updating them on what you're doing, show them data, progress, and you can't be shy about it. We've heard from some folks who say, well, my division chief doesn't require regular meetings. Sometimes you have to kind of be aggressive, take the bull by the horns, and set up that meeting yourself to make sure that you truly are on the same page and solicit that feedback. Because the last thing we want to happen is that you go in eventually for a meeting to talk about promotion and you realize that you and your division chief are not on the same page, or there are things that they would have liked to have seen more of that you're not doing, or things that you're doing that they would think, that maybe you could cut back on because they don't think it's relevant. But making sure you're having that regular feedback, having appraisals, and making sure that your goals align are very important. We want to spend a minute just to talk about the promotions process. And here it's a very stepwise process. And the first step definitely is with your division chief and the department chair. The division chief from the department and Vicki go over all of our CVs and CEP on an annual basis, whether you've had that meeting with your division chief or not. And the things they look at are your CV, your CEP, and then for as part of the promotion, you have to have letters. And then if you're on the tenure track in particular, on the investigator track, they will also look at the manuscripts that you have produced. And looking really at the threefold components of, what we consider academic medicine, what are you doing in the research realm, the clinical realm, and then education. And for those on the clinician educator track, typically it's 2 of those 3 where you have your focus. Everyone pretty much has a clinical focus. And then most folks either gravitate one way either towards research or one way towards education for that second component. There are some folks who are actively engaged all 3, but most it's 2 out of the 3. We have a copy of the APGAR document in your folder, and the APGAR document is the university's official document about the promotion process. It talks about the different ranks and what the requirements are for promotion to that rank. The departments have weighed in, of course, on all of this, but really important that you're clear where your department looks at this, because it is different. The way the surgeons look at the APGAR document and some of the external criteria that they use is actually quite different than what the Department of Medicine uses. So make sure that you're very clear on that. There is an internal departmental review committee after your documents are approved by Vicki and your division chief to go to the next level. Then she presents everything to the internal review committee, which is typically the division chiefs. It gets approval there. Then it's presented to the executive faculty. And then once it's presented to the executive faculty, then basically she steps away. And it goes to another committee at that point, and there are no Department of Medicine members on that committee. So again, that's why it's very important that what you're doing, is spelled out in your CV and in your CEP, because once she does that final presentation, then it's out of her hands. So we want to make sure that everything is clear there. And that's this ad hoc committee that's listed here. Final goes to final executive faculty review and then the WashU board review. So it is a process that takes a little bit of time. This slide, is anyone here on the tenure track? Okay, not Mario. So not going to spend a lot of time with this, but one of the things, just to point out here is that, we do have folks who do switch tracks. Some folks who go from the clinician track to the investigator track and also the other way. But for those in particular who are on the investigator track, this timeline is very important. Even though they say it's a 10-year process, if you see here, for someone who was hired October 1st, their clock actually started July 1st. So the 10-year time clock actually starts at the beginning of the academic year when they're hired, okay? So you've kind of lost 3 months there. And so if we look at today being, almost the end of 2017, that promotion process really the paperwork is really due in the dean's office around 2020, which is about 2 years before that 10-year period of 2012 is up, because it really does take that much time to make sure that everything is in order. And again, not stressing, trying to definitely stress, that's where the conversations with the division chiefs and with the department chairs are very, very important to make sure you are within the appropriate timeline for promotion. And this is just another diagram that's in your packet that, again, outlines this process of making sure that the division has all of the information. It then goes to the chairman's office here in the middle. And typically, they say a week before the packet is reviewed. And this is really, I think, where the hang-up is. And this week should probably have a question mark on it. Because what the department has found is that often when the packets are sent to the department chair's office, they get sent back. And sometimes they get sent back 2 and 3 times. And a lot of it has to do with either lack of information or formatting or grammatical errors, spelling errors, things that sound, pretty trivial, but you don't want to put a product out there that's not in proper format. So if there are formatting errors and grammatical errors and so forth, it will get sent back. And so unfortunately, it's not uncommon that packets can be sent back 2 or 3 times to make sure those things are in proper order. So make sure you're spell checking, getting someone to look at it ahead of time, and that's what we're here to assist with as well. Once the department chair actually approves the packet, then again, these timelines do move fairly on schedule. But as you can see, there are often 2 to 4 months in between the division chief's approval and then the approval of the ad hoc committee, another 1 to 4 months before executive committee approval, just depending on when those meetings actually fall. So it's a time, it does take time. So the point there is, don't think that just because today you and your division chief have decided you're going up for promotion, that it's going to happen in the next 2 months. It actually could take a year and a half before that happens. So it's a process, and so just make sure that you're ready for it.
Angela, I have a question. So correct me if I'm wrong, but like when it gets to the ad hoc committee level and executive faculty, so there's a lot of people who are not medicine and clinicians and physicians that are going to be reviewing it.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, because that was something I learned when I went through this, and it emphasized to me how much detail and how granular we should be with the information.
Absolutely.
In the CEP.
And that's why the CEP is very important for the clinicians, because keep in mind, the executive faculty, consists of not only the clinical chiefs, but the basic science chiefs. And a lot of the basic science, department chairs have no clue about what we talk about from a clinical standpoint. And so that was one of the reasons that the CEP was created, so that it gives an opportunity for us to really showcase what we're doing and to really spell it out. So the more detail that you give, the more important it is. And we'll talk about the differences between the CV and the CEP. The the CV typically just has the highlights. What's your title and maybe one little blurb about your role. But what does that really say about who you are and what you do? That's where the CEP comes in, where it's that same title, but then you expand on it. And so we'll show some examples of how that works. And the other thing Marali mentioned, once Vicki presents at the ad hoc committee level, at that point she's no longer involved. Okay, so at that committee, and she doesn't vote, for her own people at the executive committee, but at the ad hoc committee, once she presents, she leaves the room, and then the discussion is had at that point, and there's no one from the Department of Medicine involved at that point. So again, the details become very important. And again, just to reiterate, proper spelling, grammar, punctuation, and formatting. That's kind of one of her pet peeves, to say the least. We have the handouts in your folders, but these are the links, and this is in your handout. But these are the links, the link on the web for the promotions and appointments and promotions documents. This is, everyone I think knows Tom Defer probably. I will say that this is something that's new, putting your picture on your CV. So everyone is highly encouraged to put their picture on their CV. If you do not have a university picture with the blue background, just talk to your division administrator, and they'll send you over here to Becker Library. They will take a nice photo for you and make it available to you and to your division administrators. The other thing on the personal information, you see this is dated 2013, but no longer do you have to actually put your date of birth and your place of birth on there, and that's a little bit too much information. On the old format, it's for your citizenship, your date of birth, and all of that. That's no longer required. So the documents that you have are updated with what absolutely was required and what you do not need to put on there. The other thing to point out, the old format, when it looks at positions and dating, this is actually in reverse chronological order. Everything should actually be in chronological order. So the oldest should be first, okay? So oldest to newest, all right? So a lot of folks, some of you who've been around for a while using that old format, you may need to go back and just flip over your sections so that the oldest dates are first and then it's in chronological order.
Is that the same for the CEP?
And that's the same for the CEP as well. And it makes it nice from a updating standpoint, because then all you have to do is just go into that section and just add the next thing at the bottom. Just add the next thing at the bottom. All right.
It's
Yes.
for everything, right?
For the
Identification.
CEVP, the CB, the CEP, and other support.
And all the section, education, your publication, presentation, everything will be like from the older to the
Absolutely.
newer.
In every section. So your education,
Your lectures and all that.
Also
right.
from older to
Oldest to newest, yeah. So the education, college, medical school, and postgraduate education, manuscripts. And, for folks who've been around a while, the question is, some of these can get really, really long. You kind of have to decide where you want to use your cutoff date. Some folks say 5 years, but for other folks, it may be more appropriate to put 10 years. 10 years of especially when it gets to the lectures. To the lecture section. Manuscripts, grant support, that's a little bit different. But for the lectures, involvement in CME activities, then you kind of need to make a decision on how much of that you want to include. Definitely, I would say 5 years, but if you're fairly junior, then 10 years may be more appropriate in that section. And again, just to reiterate, this is to showcase the quality and extent of your clinical expertise, your educational scholarship, and other areas that are not covered in the traditional CV. And we'll show some examples of that. It's not going to be a duplicate of the CV, but it's meant to enhance, okay? But everything should be consistent as well, okay? So make sure that the documents jive, that the dates aren't different, and you're not, listing one thing on your CV that you have described and listed as something different in your CEP. So they should be very consistent with each other. Real-time document, so get in the habit of keeping it up to date as you do things. Just add it on there and keep moving. All right. So this is an example of the CEP under clinical contributions. On your CV, it may just say simply general infectious disease inpatient consult attending, but on the CEP, it gives the opportunity to actually say it's 2 to 12 weeks per year, 6 hours per day. So it shows your time commitment to this activity. What do? Daily supervision of infectious disease fellows, residents, students in the management of general infectious disease patients admitted to Barnes-Jewish Hospital. Daily documentation of all findings. Led a daily educational session for the students, residents. Average of 450 new consults seen per year. So that gives more specific details of what it means to be an inpatient consult attending. Now, some of these numbers, we actually do encourage you to put. If you have an outpatient clinic, on average, how many patients did you see, year 2017 to 18? And that's information that you can get from your division administrators, again, to show the volume of what you're doing. Similar here, bone and joint ID and patient consult attending, 7 to 10 weeks per year, 6 hours per day. And a similar description, average 285 new consultations seen per year. Again, just shows the level of expertise and the volume of what you're actually doing. And this is just more examples. ID outpatient attending, 2011 to present. Medical director of the outpatient clinic, responsible for overall clinical operations and ambulatory ID clinic providing care to approximately 3,500 unique patients. Okay, so that gives more information than just simply the medical director. What does the medical director do? And so it's established, it's described here. And then in addition, also at Barnes-West County. So under clinical contributions, we actually have 5 different components that really show what that level of expertise is and the degree, instead of just saying ID attending. Okay, all right. So this is just kind of a little bit about the differences between formatting of the CV and the CEP. Again, the links are listed on your CV, including a headshot in the right upper quadrant. It's recommended that you use half-inch margins and 12-point font to really cut out a lot of that white dead space when you start scratching stuff in together. It's kind of a department pet peeve, I guess. Use as much of the page as possible, but half-inch margins, 12-point font, listing in chronological order, oldest to newest, providing the dates that the activities were done. Do not put your social security number on there. If you happen to have an old formatted CV, it did request the social security number, but do not put your social security number on the CV or any of your other paperwork for that matter. And when you go through the format, if a section doesn't apply to you, don't put the heading there, delete that heading. So don't put a heading and leave it blank. Just take that heading out completely. Similarly for the CEP, half-inch margins again. Don't repeat your demographic information on the CV, so just put your name at the top, but you don't have to go through all of the personal demographics. They really encourage you on a formatting standpoint, avoiding numbered lists or a numbered outline. Use an outline format, but don't number it. That A, 1, 2, 3, kind of thing. Take that out. Again, chronological. Keep it concise, but as much detail as possible, and we'll go through that somewhat today. All right, so any questions to this point? I'll kind of go through some examples as we go through the CEP. Yes?
I'm sorry, I was late. You may have covered this already. I'm a second career person. My first career was not trivial, but it may not be relevant. So I don't know whether to include that or not.
Was it here? Was it here?
It was not here. No.
Okay. So one of the things that they recommend is that your CV, as far as previous positions, potentially listing where you were before, but most of the relevant information should be what's occurred here at Washington University, and particularly for the clinical educator portfolio.
Can we use 11, size 11 font? Because I have the other.
12.
You have to use 12.
Yeah, 11 starts getting a little small.
Okay. Thank you. Many pages then.
So, if you use 12 point and it's 10 pages, it's 10 pages. But when you start dropping below that, then the print starts to get small. So nothing smaller than 12 point font.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. So the three major components of the CEP: clinical contributions, educational contributions, and community service contributions. And that's something that's not on the traditional CEP. So when we look at ongoing clinical activities, the first major heading, describe all inpatient and outpatient clinical activities. So we want to include the location, so whether it's Barnes-Jewish Hospital or is your clinic at the CAM. If you have a clinic at the CAM and at one of the off-campus sites, make sure you include those. What type of service? Inpatient, consult, general ward attending. So, you want to list the inpatient consult as a different section than the outpatient because you're doing two different things. How much time on service? Is it weeks, months per year? Is it, half the year? Is it constant? Really give that time. Is it quarterly? And then actively describe what your responsibilities are. If you're supervising fellows, residents, medical students, if you're providing education during that rotation, if you're interacting and, if you're involved in some quality improvement with the nurses as part of that rotation, where you have to meet with ancillary staff, that all gets described in this section. The second component category is developing methods to improve quality care and efficiency of clinical care. So describing the area of need and what was developed. Were you involved in that? So documentation guidelines. were you involved in developing any of that? Outreach clinics, policy and procedure development, involvement in QI initiatives. So that's where all of that would go for that type of description. And then who was involved in the development? Was it something that you did yourself? Was it a panel? Was it a team? Were you the leader of the team? And who was your target audience? Okay, so that goes into that second category. Clinical trials and grants. So again, here you really only want to put the trials that are related to patient-oriented research. Okay, so basic science kind of things that you may be involved in, you wouldn't put on your CEP, but this is a great place to put the industry trials, because often we don't put those on our traditional CVs. So the industry-sponsored trials would go here with a description. Don't include any budget information. That's going to go on your CV or potentially on your other support. And what was your role in the trial? Were you the PI? Were you a co-investigator? Were you just simply involved in recruitment? But, 1 or 2 sentences describing how active you were participating in this trial. And then if you have any non-governmental granting agencies, that may apply to this section as well. So this is one area that often there's question about, should this go on my CV or should this go on my CEP? And typically, NIH trials, AHA, some of the, what I'm trying to say, some of the foundation grants that are awarded, those typically will go on your CV, but this is really the place where those industry sponsored trials and the other clinical trials will go, because often those don't go on the CV. And a lot of times you just kind of have to, look at each trial individually. It may be more appropriate one place or the other, or sometimes you may double list it. But typically you don't want to be duplicative.
For the cooperative group, like Alliance trials or NRG trials, that's where it should go for the CV.
Which one?
Alliance or ARG and RPOG, NRG, or all kind of the cooperative group trials.
CV.
That's CV.
CV. All right. So if you have any questions about that, we can kind of help you with it. Clinical administrative responsibilities, particularly if you're the clinical director of an area, you want to lay that out. Fellowship, fellowship or residency training program directors, if you have PA or nurse practitioner oversight. Again, describing your role in administration. Who are you supervising? How long have you done it? What does it require? So really describing that role there. The time commitment. You're spending time on this, so giving an idea of how much time this is actually taking. Did it involve, any development? Is this something that you created, or that's, you're making changes? Describe that there and what your role is in that administrative role. And then original contributions to the medical literature. Again, this is a place where you have to be careful that you're not duplicating your CV. It's okay to say CV here because sometimes, here we typically think we want to include non-traditional publications. So something that you may have published online or in non-peer-reviewed journals. Anything that's peer-reviewed, you want to put that on your CV. But if it's a non-peer-reviewed journal, an online publication, then definitely that goes on your on your CEP. Any educational pamphlets that you've done. Some folks have developed CDs or DVDs for health professionals. That would go here on the CEP and not on the CV. And still numbering from oldest to newest and bolding your name. So a similar format, okay? But you definitely don't want to duplicate the publications from your CV here, okay? So again, just kind of think about it. Peer-reviewed on your CV, non-peer-reviewed supplemental types of publications would go on your CEP. All right. And then feedback, all of the sections have a comment for feedback. And you kind of have to be careful with this. Your division chiefs and the course-ship directors typically have the feedback from the medical students. And there's also feedback from residents and fellows as well. The faculty practice plan has their survey data, which is actually, it's more, it's hard numbers, so you can actually get that information. But in putting this in there, you don't want to, start putting in a lot of, just sort of blanket comments. Because if you go through the medical student comments or the resident comments, of course you're going to pick the good stuff. And I usually only read the bad stuff, so because that's usually what gets put out there. So it may be useful to have someone take a look at like the medical student comments or resident or even some of the patient comments and just even potentially write a brief summary. Some of the division chiefs may do that, the larger divisions, I doubt it, but if there's a senior person in the division who would be willing to look at that and just sort of write a brief summary of the comments, that would actually carry more weight than just sort of pulling select, comments that, Dr. Castro is a great teacher. Well, that might be 4 out of the 10 people, but what did the other 6 say? So you just have to be careful. Now, the faculty practice plan data, on the other hand, those are the surveys that they do in clinic. Those are actually hard numbers. So you could actually get that data and could say, for the academic year 2016 to 17, the average score was, 4.8 out of 5. So that actually kind of gives a hard number there. So the feedback section, a lot of folks just say, available on request. But if that information is available. All right. So the second section is the teaching section. And this really, I think, for the educators, the CEP, again, is that place where you can really spell out what you're doing in education, because on the CV, you just really don't have time, the space for it. You kind of list what your teaching title is, and that's about it. So for any of the courses that you're involved in, you want to indicate your role, whether you're the course master or small group leader, a brief description of the course or the lecture or symposia or a panel, who's the target audience, and give an idea of the number of folks that are impacted. Again, the time commitment, and don't undervalue yourself. So even if you're giving the same lecture to the medical students, atrial fibrillation, and you've done it the last 10 years, make sure it's clear that this is a lecture you've given for 10 years to the medical students. Okay, so don't undervalue that you're doing maybe the same lecture, but don't undervalue what you're doing from that standpoint. If you're involved in new courses, again, describing that in detail. Who's the target audience? Here's an example: Introduction to Newborn Medicine. The purpose of this 10-hour course is to provide an introduction into newborn medicine, not otherwise offered in the first-year curriculum. Students review functional, blah, blah, blah. So give a brief description to give an idea of what was created if you were involved in that. Same thing for handouts or other guides for trainees, whether it's residents or fellows. A detail about what that need was and what your involvement is in creating it or potentially creating it. Curriculum development, same thing. Describe the course, any description of changes that were maybe made to an existing course, the target audience, and the time commitment. And that's the key. What did you do? How did you do it? How long did it take? And who was the target audience? So that's kind of the common theme through most of these different components. Development of new methods of education. Were there simulation models? Were you doing assessment tools? Same thing. Description of what exactly it was that you were involved in. Mentoring of trainees. Again, a lot of us mentor folks, and you actually put their names on the CV. The list, the name of the mentee, the time period, and the activity, and then what they're doing now. Because a lot of our trainees have gone on to become division chiefs and department chairs. Now, there's a difference between someone who just comes to you and talks to you one time about their career plans. They're interested in internal medicine, and you talk to them about internal medicine and what you do. That's different, and that does not go on the CEP. We're actually talking about folks that you've actually had a relationship with, that you can actually say that you have, you've contributed something to their career development and their career success. If someone who did a project with you, a clinical project, or they worked with you on a manuscript about a project. So these are folks that you had significant relationships and not just one or two conversations about their career development.
Can I actually ask you a question with that?
Mm-hmm.
That makes total sense, but what if it's part of like a program with the medical school where you're, like there's a preceptorship program, and even if you meet with one student, but you meet with a lot of them over and over again?
Yeah, so that wouldn't count.
It would not count?
That would
Okay.
not count. I mean, so you would put that as an activity
Okay.
under your community service that you're, a mentor as part of AMLA. But under this particular category, we're talking about those one-on-one relationships where you have a direct role in guiding that person to the next step of their career. So there is a place for those group activities, but that would be under the community service component. All right. Development or participation in CME courses, same thing. We're all giving lectures, national conferences, local conferences, grand rounds for your division, for your department. That all counts. List the course name, your role, the topic, the location, and the date, and again, chronological order. Same thing here for feedback. Here, there's an opportunity to put awards, for teaching. If you have a Loeb Teaching Fellowship, or if you received one of the Distinguished Service Teaching Awards, that actually goes under the feedback and honors and awards for education. So again, concrete type of things to show your significant contributions to education. And then there's a section on lay literature. So again, here, this is stuff that's geared for the lay audience. Articles maybe written for a local community paper or a patient pamphlet or something like that. Okay? All right. And then finally, community service. This is where all the committee work goes. So whether it's university, hospital, department, look for leadership opportunities. To gives you an opportunity to get to know people around the medical school, and also to get involved and also learn how the medical school works. But make sure that when you list this, that you're not just putting committees that you were a part of and never showed up to a meeting, or you maybe went to one meeting and they had 6. But try to make sure you're getting involved in committees where you can make a specific contribution. Okay. If you're on a committee and it's really not your thing and you're not able to attend, maybe that's something you ought to step away from and let somebody else do it, or find those committees for you that's really within your area of interest. But you want to describe the committee and your role there, and again the time commitment that it took. Participating in local, regional, and national committees is very important, and this is where I think mentorship is very important, and sponsorship. Getting to know people outside of the university. And when you go through the APGAR document and the criteria for promotion, especially from assistant to associate, that's one of the components is national reputation and national recognition. So, sometimes just asking folks if your division chief or one of your colleagues that is involved in the American Heart Association, hey, is there an opportunity for me to participate, to review abstracts or to be on a committee? That's really kind of how you get your foot in the door and then get involved so that folks get to know who you are and what your area of expertise is. But that's actually very important, developing that national and regional reputation, because that's part of the promotion process. Here also you can include participation in editorial boards, grant reviews, and manuscript reviews as well. Media activities also count. This doesn't go on the CV. So, media relations is always looking for folks to, give a radio spot about something or a local TV interview. And a lot of this comes through WashU Public Relations or even Barnes Jewish Public Relations. And if you're interested in that, let them know. Just let them know, hey, I'd be interested if you have something, because they're always looking for people to talk about a topic. And they'll call you up, and you can say yay or nay. Just again, an example, on your traditional CV, you would just simply list Clerkship Director, Internal Medicine, 2001 to present. But on the CEP, you have the title, Clerkship Director in Internal Medicine, but then you actually describe what that involved. Okay, so more detail on the CEP. And then there's this last category for other. If there's something else that you're involved in, it just doesn't seem to fit any one of the other categories, then you put it in this other category here. All right, so in summary, APGAR document, the WashU CV, and the CEP, the formats are on the web, and these are the links. We have examples in your packet of the CV. You'll delete all the blue out and just kind of fill up everything at the bottom. The the CEP, these are the different categories, and we also have another document that just breaks these out a little bit farther with a little bit more information about what goes in each section. There's a copy of the APGAR document as well, and then there's another document included that's guidelines for career development, and then some other general tips in putting all this information together. One final thing before you leave today, please make sure you fill out the course evaluation.